Okay, I'm calling to order this regular meeting of council. First, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on a traditional unceded territory, the Stanawas First Nation. First item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. I'll just make the motion that the November 30th, 2022 regular council meeting agenda be adopted. Just noting we have several corrections on page 2 and 46. So more specifically, under item 9C. Anyways, it just and we all have green sheets showing you the correction. So is someone prepared to second that? Okay, second by Councillor Savage. Any discussion? Additions, deletions? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. That takes us on to item 7 of our agenda. So we have the consent agenda. Any items being requested to be removed? Just a couple sets of minutes. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to making a motion that the recommendations listed for items 7A through 7B in the consent agenda be approved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Savage. Call the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. That takes us on to public input period. So I don't think we have anybody remotely registered, but okay. I'll just read the preamble anyway. So persons recognized by the chair to speak must first state their name and address for the record, may speak once for up to 2 minutes unless council resolves otherwise, and are limited to providing comment regarding items listed on the council agenda for this evening. Comments must be directed to the chair, not to be directed to individual council members, staff, or the audience, and must not include personal issues. We have one person in the gallery this evening. This would be your time. And again, nobody remotely registered. Okay, so we'll move on in the agenda. So we're under item 9 of our agenda, legislative matters. So we have under 9A, District of Lantzville 2022-2023 budget detailed line item forecast and expenditure budget provisions for information. So again, this is in the agenda for information. If there's questions, this is the time. So go ahead, Councillor Savage.
Yes, just like to thank staff for providing this more detailed budget. It's the main reason for me for it is it just gives more details of numbers. So if I fulfill my commitment to lower the tax increase, then I need to know the specific numbers to see where things can be addressed. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lerner.
Yes, if I have questions about the specific items, it says it's for information. So would that, through to the chair, would that be something to ask specific line items now or at the January 23rd budget meeting?
If there's like a real specific question, about how it's reported, that would probably be appropriate. But going into it line by line at this time is probably not.
Okay, I'll wait
the
then. Thank you.
Time to do that. So
Thank you.
okay. All right. Nothing further, so we'll move on to 9B. So we have bylaw number 229. Is someone prepared to make that motion? Okay, Councillor Jones. Microphone.
That District of Lantzville Officers Indemnification and Delegation Bylaw number 172, 2018, Amendment Parkland, Bylaw number 329, 2022, be given first reading.
Okay, and is someone prepared to second it? Second by Councillor Savage. This is just introduction, so there's no debate. So I'll simply move to call in the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. It takes us on to the second half. Someone prepared to make that motion? If you wish, Councillor Jones.
That District of Lantzville Officers Indemnification and Delegation Bylaw number 172, 2018, Amendment Parkland, Bylaw number 329, 2022, be given second and third readings.
Okay, and do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lerner. Discussion through to Councillor Jones and then Councillor Lerner if you wish.
Yes, thank you. This is really quite simple in my mind. We have the provincial requirement for park space and a system in place where that can be bought out for cash in lieu, and I cannot support the further reduction of green space with development. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lerner.
Thank you. Yes, basically the modification here is in delegation authority, and I believe that this is just restoring what I see as some of the democratic process where we can get more public input and then proceed through to have council make some decisions on that. So I just think that this is part of the transparency process, and I think that it's well worthwhile. Also, probably good from the perspective of both the community and the developers who can talk to council and present their parkland recommendations, and then council can weigh it. So I just think this is part of the process that should be restored, and I am happy with that. So thank you.
And any additional speakers? Okay, I will move to calling the question then. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. It takes us on to 9C, which is bylaw number 333. So this is the one where we have a correction for. We have a replacement page, the green sheet that was handed out. So is someone prepared to give first reading? Director Coates.
Though, I don't know if you want me to point this out after you have the motion on the floor.
Yeah, the motion needs to be amended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just the motion being amended, there's another question for council to answer and decide if they want to change in the bylaw. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Lerner? Okay, so, so in terms of the suggested wording to the motion, Director Coates, we're just amending, changing the 2021 to 2022, correct?
That's correct. So it would be, sorry.
Well, I'll just simply make the motion then that the District of Lantzville Council Procedure Bylaw number 141/2020 amendment, open bracket, Committee of the Whole, close bracket, bylaw number 333, 2022 be given first reading.
As corrected.
Oh, as corrected on page 46 of our agenda. Thank you. Is there someone prepared to second that? Second by Councillor Savage. Discussion, so through to you, Councillor Savage, if you wish.
Sorry, actually, I think we're on first reading, so I should.
Oh, right, sorry, out of habit.
We'll
Yes,
catch
this
that
is
up
just the
second.
introduction, yes. So I'll move to call in question then. All those in favor and opposed, it's carried unanimously. Moving on to the second part, so that the District of Lantzville Council Procedure Bylaw number 141, 2020 amendment, open bracket, Committee of the Whole, close bracket, bylaw number 333, 2022, as also corrected in page 46 of the agenda, be given second and third readings. There's our seconder, seconded by Councillor Lerner, and then Councillor Lerner, if you wish.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I just want to thank staff for the quick turnaround on this. This is wonderful to see that we are able to have all these options for Committee of the Whole as a council. Gives us the ability to go more in depth on discussions, and I believe it's another tool in the democracy toolbox for council. So I'm in full support of this motion, and thank you very much.
Okay, and any further speakers on this item? So Councillor Savage, go ahead. Oh,
Yes, we need committee of the whole so we can discuss proposed amendments to major bylaws like this very procedure bylaw. And it's the best vehicle, but this term we've got an efficient council who works quickly to get through business. So I don't think we need to overuse the CAL meetings. At the start, they'll be important, but eventually, just so you know, in terms of time element. And the most important thing about CAL meetings, Councillor Lerner, is we sometimes get dinner served here if they run into another meeting. So.
okay. So Director Coates.
Yes, sorry, I wasn't sure whether I should have added it to the report, but certainly the report indicated that what we added to the procedure bylaw through the draft amendment was what was previously in the previous procedure bylaw, number 118. So at the time that 118 was in place a few years ago, we did not have electronic meetings. So there's potential if council wishes to be able to have electronic committee of the whole meetings, then they would need to amend a couple more sections. So there would need to be an amendment motion. And I can point you to page 59 of the council agenda. This is the copy of the procedure bylaw as it stands today. And under clause 9, item 1, it says a member of council who is unable to attend in person at an electronic or hybrid meeting of council or a standing committee. So the way this is written currently, that means that there can be no electronic or hybrid select committees for council members attending or select committee members attending. And the same would stand for these committee of the whole. So if you wanted to add committee of the whole, there's a few spots in this section where we would need to add it. The first one would be in item 1, right after the word council in the second line. You would add COTW, because that is the acronym for committee of the whole. And also in item number 2, where it says the member presiding at a council or standing committee, you would add a comma after council and COTW. And the third spot is in item 7 on the next page, where again, it starts with a council or a standing committee meeting may be held. And so you would go, a council, you go comma, COTW. So there are 3 spots where you would be adding COTW if you wish, to have that flexibility of a member attending if they couldn't, electronically, if they couldn't attend in person.
Okay, thank you for that. So through to council, in terms of the appetite to make that change, seems rather simple to do, a simple amendment. So we can open it for discussion. Councillor Savage?
Yes, I'll make that motion that COTW be inserted in item 1 after the word, what was that word?
Council.
It's that the motion on the floor be amended by adding, so right now the motion says be given second and third. It just popped off again, sorry. So the motion on your motion would be that the motion on the floor be amended by adding. And so right now, it ends at third readings, so you'd be adding as amended
Okay.
in section 9.1, 9.2, and 9.7. By striking council or and inserting council, comma, COTW or.
Okay, I move that the motion on the floor be amended in section 9.1 and 9.2 and 9.7 by striking council or and inserting COTW.
Inserting council, comma, COTW or, yes.
And inserting council COTW or.
Correct.
And seconded by Councillor Lerner. Discussion on the amendment. It's pretty straightforward. Just permits to have electronic meetings. All right, so I will call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? And opposed? That's carried unanimously. Now we're back to the main motion as amended. Any further debate, comment? Okay, hearing or seeing nothing, I'll move to call in question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. All right, so that takes us on to 9D, which is bylaw number 334. Someone prepared to give this one first reading? Councillor Lerner.
the District of Lantzville Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Bylaw Number 109, 2014, Amendment Bylaw Number 334, 2022 be given first reading.
And do we have a seconder to that? Second by Counselor Mundell. We'll move to calling the question. Again, all those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Now we're on to the next portion of that motion. If someone's prepared to make that motion. Counselor Lerner, go ahead.
The District of Lantzville Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Bylaw Number 109, 2014, Amendment Bylaw Number 334, 2022 be given second and third readings.
And do we have a seconder? Second by Counselor Mundell. Discussion, so through the mover and then seconder.
Yes, I think this was discussed quite a bit at the last meeting, so I won't continue it too further, but I'll just say that I believe that this is the right path to go down for accessibility for the public to be able to interact with the information at the district level and reducing impediments and barriers. So I support the motion. Thank you.
And through the seconder, if you wish.
Nothing to add.
And then through to the body. Okay, I will move then to call in question then. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. That takes us on to item 10A. So we have the Phase 2 Village Commercial Core Improvement for information. And there's a motion, and then council would have arrived this evening to find a nice big blown up picture of the design that's says looking east, typical section looking east. So anyways, through to council, we have Director Spears on the screen this evening. So if there's any questions this time, this would be the time to ask. If there's any specific questions, Councilor Lerner, go ahead.
Yes, I'm just, through your worship to staff, I'm just taking a look at this image and drawing, which is wonderful. I appreciate that. And I noticed that the diagram shows sidewalks, and it lists them as asphalt sidewalks. So I just wanted to understand whether there was any consideration of alternatives to asphalt and how that would interact with the current layout, including the bus shelter. Thank you.
Through your worship to council, we didn't actually look at anything else other than asphalt, mainly due to budgeting. The real problem with looking at something like pavers and whatnot, we have a limited budget. So we're trying to, what we're trying to do is fit all of the upgrades into the budget by incorporating what we've done so far.
Okay, thank you. And how does that, I'm just looking at the diagram here. I see a sidewalk going up to what I think is the bus shelter, but I'm just wondering how, it isn't labeled, so I'm just wondering how it interfaces with the current village bus shelter.
Through your worship to council, when the bus shelter was being constructed, we took into account the idea of a walkway in behind the bus shelter, as I'm sure Councillor Savage can attest to. The siting of it allows us to actually put a traveled portion of asphalt down to in front of the pad so that it's wheelchair accessible and have the sidewalk behind it. And we've maneuvered the actual pathway to the bus shelter in through the trees and the posts and everything that's down there.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions? Councillor Jones?
Yes, just a question for Director Spears through the chair. Thank you. When looking at alternative surfaces to sidewalks, when possible, we are interested in doing permeable surfaces to absorb the rainwater, and certainly pavers do that. I understand that they're quite expensive, but there are other ways to provide permeable surfaces. Gravel base would be one of them, something like the Trans-Canada Trail Standard. And I'm just wondering if that is considered suitable for wheelchairs.
Through your worship, the council, to a certain point, I think certain materials could be suitable for wheelchairs. However, they come with a high degree of maintenance. That's one of our issues with some of the alternatives that you could come up with. I mean, we're definitely wanting to be able to use those alternatives and absorb as much groundwater as we can, or as much surface water as we can to reinfiltrate back into the ground. It's basically the goal of the bylaw 175 is to try to ensure that. However, there is maintenance issues that have come along with that. As we move forward and as we look into the bylaw 175 in the future here, I think there's lots of things that we can look at that makes a lot more sense. However, currently the bylaw kind of tells us it's supposed to be like a concrete or concrete asphalt surface. So that's what the initial design has gone by, and the initial cost estimate that we used for the actual grant application as well. So
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Jones.
Thank you. I don't have further questions then because I think you've raised another point which we should address, which is that we need to take a close look at bylaw 175 and our strategic priorities, and then we will be in a better position to provide some guidance on this design going forward. So I would suggest that we wait on this. Thank you.
Further discussion. Your microphone's on, Councillor Savage.
So
Oh, you want to, okay, go ahead.
I was just waiting to make the motion, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. That staff be requested effective November 30th, 2022, to have work ceased on the Phase 2 Village Improvement Streetscape Plan until council has received the plan and given recommendations. And further, that council be sent a copy of the most updated plan.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? Second by Councillor Lerner. Director Coates.
I think for clarity, staff would need to know, were you expecting a different plan than the plan you've just received?
I was gonna lead into that. But,
Yeah, I hadn't received this before I made the motion. This is the first I've seen of this particular plan. But if there are other ones with a little more detail, that would be great. If not, then we can work with this one, I think.
Turn my microphone off. Through to Councillor Savage. The plan actually is in our agenda this evening, so on page 89. Because of how small it is and trying to make out any detail, that's why I requested to have the big ones here for us this evening to look at. But I think, and I don't want to get too much into the debate right off the hop, but you know, I think it is a valid question. How much plans do you want? Do you want to have all, similar to what we've had in the past, like where's?
Yeah, well, that's up to council. My opinion is that if it's not already done, that's fine. It's just we were sent one with a different design in the spring, and it was more detailed in terms of specifics. That's all. So if this is as detailed as it gets now, that's fine. There's no point to go to the extra trouble of more detail, only if it's already done, but that's just my viewpoint. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know who else was on the speakers list. I think John, sorry, Councillor Lerner, go ahead.
Oh, yes, I was the seconder, so in that case, I think this is a valuable motion, and that's because we still have to do our strategic priority planning. And in addition to that, there are other things on the agenda this evening, such as bylaw 175 and others that could affect this. So I just think it's worth holding off for the strategic priorities for council to have a chance to determine what the direction we want to see these sorts of things go. And it won't be a huge delay because we're scheduled to do that in December and January. And during the holidays, I don't foresee, there's a lot of snow on the ground right now. I don't foresee major construction anyway. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I just noticed that. So Director Spears, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I just, through your worship, I just wanted to make sure council is aware that the Lantzville Road Revitalization Commercial Core Phase 2 project is required to be completed by March 31st, 2023. And that doesn't give us a lot of time to make a lot of changes. So um, hopefully we can, if there's any changes immediately, it would be nice to know of.
Okay, so through the rest of the council, Councillor Savage, and then Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to the motion, if I may. So the reason I made this, we have 3 new council members who've yet to see the plan, and including myself, I haven't seen this one. There's some very interesting things in this one that the previous one did not have. So I'd certainly like to review it, and I certainly myself were prepared to do it in a timely way. And it's important to just to review it. And it's important we get this designed as good as possible, especially as there may be cost overruns as there were in phase 1, that if we're standing behind the plan for the public, then it's important we try to get it as acceptable as possible with parking and so on. And because that was one of the complaints in the last one, is too much reduced parking. And just so that we have time to review this design, which I think can be done fairly quickly. So it's welcoming for all to visit the village. And apparently this grant allows some flexibility in design. It's not as stringent as the ICE-T grant was, is my understanding. So that's basically it. Thank you, and thanks for the time you put into this. As I say, some interesting things here. Thank you.
Okay, any additional discussion? So Director Coates?
I just need some clarity for the motion.
Sure.
When it was read, it was until council has received the plan, is what the mover had stated. So as long as we're good with that. And then there was some discussion that since council has received the plan, maybe you don't need the and further that. So I just need to know if the body has agreed to drop that.
Well, I did have a quick question through to Director Spears. Are there additional plans that could be made available to council, or is this it? Is this the only drawing?
Of course, there's the detailed engineered drawings, which basically are, for engineering purposes. But the end result is the actual sketch that you're looking at right now, was taken from those detailed design drawings. So, and I don't recall any other drawings being available prior to this one. So.
Okay. Councillor Jones, go ahead.
Yes, I also had seen a previous drawing that I think was on an agenda some months ago, so you feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Chair. But Tweed Hope Road, I thought was shown to be opposite the school road, and there was some sort of stormwater management building there, and yeah, so I am thinking this is slightly different, but it probably doesn't matter here or there, to be honest.
I'm just wondering if it was the town site planning concept drawing, that is perhaps maybe what you're referring to. That's the only one I can think of. Councillor Savage?
Yes, I'll send the one to Director Spears that I received last spring so you can see what I mean. And only if it's easy, if you can easily send council some of the engineering ones with more detail, that would be good to know, just in terms of what sort of drainage systems are being installed and so on, in terms of cost, where we can see where the cost is coming from. So anything like that, as long as it's easy to send, doesn't have to be everything, but just to give an idea of the engineering and a little more detail would be great. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lerner?
Yeah, I was just seeking some clarification because when I read the motion, it says council has reviewed the plan and given recommendations, but I had a note here when it was that it also at one point said council would receive the plan and give recommendations. So I just want to understand the difference in which motion's on the floor right now.
The motion that's on the floor is the motion that was stated by the mover and seconded, and it was exactly as written in the agenda. However, the words received was used, so it's until council has received the plan. So that staff be requested to have work ceased on the Phase 2 Village Improvement Streetscape Plan until council has received the plan and given recommendations. And further that, because
Right.
I still haven't got an indication if the body is dropping the and further that.
In that case, I'd like to move an amendment to the motion to strike the word received the plan and replace with reviewed the plan as originally written, and to add to the end of, and to change where it says, and further that council be sent a copy of the most updated plan, to say, and further that council be sent a copy of the most updated engineer drawings.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? So second by Councillor Savage, discussion on the amendment. So Councillor Lerner, anything further?
No.
Councillor Savage?
Yes, I was just going to say the motion was fine as it was. If this was the plan, then we tick off that it's been received. So, but anyway, I'll go along with this if you're doing that. We don't want to overcomplicate it. So I suggest we just go with this and pass it. Thank you.
Anything further on the amendment? Okay, we'll move to call in question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. That just takes us back to the main motion as amended, slightly altered wording. Director Coates?
And for clarity, I will talk to Director Spears so that we can put this on the agenda for December 7th then.
Okay. Anything further with the main motion as amended? For myself, I do think this is important to continue on with. I did have a question through to Director Spears in terms of approving the final design and moving it off so it can go out to tender. What do you anticipate the turnaround time will be once it goes out to tender? Are we ready to tender this as is?
Through to your worship, actually the tendering process will be halted quite a bit in making any changes in this drawing or in this sketch, because if we actually make changes, then it has to go back to the engineers and they have to make those changes that have to be reviewed and ensure that they actually kind of match up with the transit regulations that are in place for roads and sidewalks and whatnot. So to make any kind of significant change now would probably put us past our March 31st deadline. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, because my understanding would be like if we've got it to this point, there'd be enough, obviously, the engineering report that would be used for this detailed design would inform the tendering process. And so we were probably, like as things are right now, if we were just move ahead, you could tender this very soon? Would that be fair to say?
Yes, that's correct.
So through to council, I think in terms of timelines, I honestly don't know how we can really make any significant change. My biggest concern around this whole process was just somehow getting it back to the community just to have a look at it and then mainly give input around not necessarily the hardscape features like the walk paths and so forth, but more the green features. As we heard some feedback from the community about what's getting planted and all that sorts of stuff, and even just the final design around the landscaping aspects of it. It says in the report at the bottom of page 87, there has been some consultation, or there has been consultation with affected property owners. I don't know, maybe through the staff, you can provide some more information on this. How many people actually did give feedback, or how many property owners? And then And I guess other pieces, do we know with any degree of certainty that all property owners received an invitation to provide feedback?
And yes, your worship, all the property owners that are affected along the route were sent notifications, and I had two people phone back, one identifying that they wanted to make sure that their driveway was kept so they could actually access their backyard, which we clearly have on the sketch. And the other had concerns about their tree has a branch hanging over, and they didn't want their branch hanging over the sidewalk, and if we would trim that when the time came for construction. But that was it.
Okay. So, and I did, I'm aware of one business owner, they had communicated with me a while back just around maintaining the parking in front of their building, and it looks like that's going to be kept, so in front of the old market. So I don't know if there's any, again, my concern is moving forward, it's always tough with these, is just making sure adequate public consultation is being done, and also with the broader community, because we are using, even though it's gas tax funds, these funds can be used anywhere throughout the community for the betterment of the community. So, our residents are going to be going through as pedestrians, also potentially parking down there and so forth. So, it'd be nice to have that feedback from the residents, but I honestly don't think it's going to work within the timelines provided. So this is a tough one. As things stand now, is I'm likely not to support the motion simply because it's not going to fit with the timelines. And in terms of staff, like, has staff reached out to the I can't remember who's given us the grant on this one, but with the grant program and if you're far enough along in the process, will they grant extensions? Or is it a hard, stop when it comes to the end of March? Is there a possibility of getting an extension to get everything done by the 31st?
Through your worship, I'm not certain. I couldn't answer that without actually speaking to someone um, regarding that, and I'd have to inquire.
Yeah, because even if it's tendered tomorrow, and we get people coming back and successfully bidding on it and council approves it and so forth, in terms of the work actually being completed by March 31st, is that realistic as well?
To your worship, yeah, we're probably looking at about 2 months, 2 to 3 months worth of work, and that's kind of what the timeline we were having is kind of trying to get the tender out and back by really early in January, but um,
Okay.
it's council's wish. We'll do whatever.
All right, so Councillor Lerner and then Councillor Jones.
Yes, I just think that the chair brought up some very good points, and through your worship to staff, if it is possible to request an extension, I think that would be wonderful. Just a little more time because, for example, it says proposed landscaping. We've heard a lot of feedback on previous landscaping. It would be a good opportunity for the public to have some consultation on the type of landscaping they want to see. And also, as we go into our strategic priorities and discussions of other things, there may be some things that, even if they don't impact the major parts of the project, may have some small tweaks. So having just a tiny bit more time would be great. So if it is possible to request an extension for the expenditure of funds and completion of work, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Yes, all good comments. I personally cannot support something just because we might lose some funding on it if it isn't a plan which is acceptable to the community. And that goes beyond the visuals. We have a fiscal responsibility to this community also. We're looking at $650,000 project and it's not fully covered by a grant. So I would definitely need time to look at this in more detail and look forward to hearing whether or not it's possible to defer to extend that deadline, because that certainly would make a huge difference.
Further debate, Councillor Mundell, go ahead.
I also agree that we need more public feedback on the concept, the design. I personally heard a lot about the phase one, about some of the tight corners for commercial vehicles and some of the challenges that came as a result of the design. So that has me just concerned, and it's really difficult to tell from this picture as to you know what exactly would be affected, and whose curbs and things like that might be impacting people's homes or businesses. So I just feel like I would like a little bit more information.
Okay, anything further? Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, I've just seen this for the first time. As I say, I'm not prepared to even comment on it now until I have a chance to have a look at it and review it. I think that's very important we do that. So that's all we're doing with this motion. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just kind of speak briefly to the funding. When this first went through, I wasn't a huge fan. I think, in fact, I voted against it with respect to using additional gas tax funds to further fund this project, or phase two of it anyways. You know, there is a substantial amount of grant money, almost $500,000 on the line here, which I don't take too lightly either. So I think the works are, you know, would be beneficial to the whole of the community moving forward, no doubt about it. It's just in terms of putting the plan forward to the community in some fashion would be appropriate in my opinion. I think at this point, for what it's worth, you know, we can simply refer this motion to next meeting. So that would take us to next week. It's 1 week. And in that 1 week period, we could simply post this to the district site and for people to give that feedback. And if, I don't know how many people are gonna catch it necessarily, but you can try and garner some feedback on it, on the design itself. But you know, those are just some thoughts. But it's not really a great situation. And then in the meantime, I'm sure Director Spears or someone from staff can be contacting the agency that's in charge of their grant and find out whether or not this can be extended. So, Director Coates?
I'm still showing the amendment motion on the floor.
Oh, no, we disposed of that.
You disposed
Yeah.
of that? Okay.
So that was
So the
to
main-
change the wording back to what it was in the.
Right, and to add
Send a
engineered
copy of the
drawings.
engineering.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So then your motion would be to refer the motion on the floor,
Well, I haven't quite made that motion. It
well,
seems there's an
but to
appetite.
December 7th.
Yeah.
And then if you could include the wording for staff to check on extension.
Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was just waiting for you to speak, but I know I won't not support a referral motion. I just want to get this done so we can review it. Then we can go from there. Council's perfectly capable of meeting deadlines and appreciating the timelines and so on. But for now, I want a chance to review it. Thank you.
So my question through to you then, Councillor Savage, when would you want to have this come back? Like, we probably should set some kind of timeline in order to consider this.
Well, we have 1 week for December 7th. We can indicate at that point if we need more time for review. We have the council priorities on December 16th. We can perhaps address it then. So why don't we pass the motion and then we can touch it again, get a verbal update from staff on December 7th as to what they've found out about extending and so on.
All right. And strategic priority sessions at 12. Just,
Yeah. And there isn't a motion yet for staff to find out if it can be extended. I assumed you were going to make that motion after this one.
so through to council, is there anything further on the main motion as amended then? Okay, so I'll move to calling the question then. All those in favor and opposed, nobody, Mayor Swain's opposed, carries. Through to staff, do we need a motion of council for staff to phone? Is that would prefer to have that?
Yes, we'd prefer that, because then if we jeopardize the grant in some way, and
Sure.
better, it has been council's decision. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just make the motion as a follow-up motion to this, that council directs staff to contact, oops, I've lost the, pardon me? Thank you. Get the right grant. Oh, I had it flipped there. Sorry, to contact, I had it here, the Pacific Economic Development Grant, or Pacific Economic Development Canada, to find out whether or not the Canada Community Revitalization Fund grant application can be extended beyond March 31st, 2023. And that was seconded by Councillor Savage. And through to council, discussion on the motion, pretty self-explanatory. Go ahead, Councillor Savage.
Yes, a very simple reason to give for an extension, which is really the true reason, is that construction is so busy because of the boom going on the island that it takes a long time to line up construction and to complete the structure. That's a very good reason to give. And not that we may want to tweak it or review it. It's really this long period of finding construction and implementing it is the true reason for the delay. So I would suggest that could be a reason given. Thank you.
Actually, I just had an idea, but through Director Coates, if you can just read back the motion that I made. And then I might actually make a quick amendment to it, so go ahead.
And I was just trying to see if I had that. That a staff contact Pacific Economic Development Canada to find out if the, and we have to say, if the $487,500 contribution from the Canada Community Revitalization Fund contract can be extended beyond March 31st, 2023. So we have a contribution contract from them.
Yeah.
So
So I was, all I wanted to do, and maybe you can help me out, is instead of to find out, to delete that and insert something to the extent that we request an extension. So however that wording would work. We don't want to find out. We're simply making the request to have it extended beyond the 31st. I think that would probably be better wording.
I don't see Director Spears' hand up, so I assume it'd be striking, the amendment would be to strike find out and to request.
Yeah, okay. So as long as that works and works to the seconder, Councillor Savage? Okay, great. Further discussion on the amendment, or not the amendment, but just, or I guess it is an amendment, so. Actually, I didn't even get a seconder to that. So second by Councillor Lerner. And already had some discussion, so I'll simply call the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. So we're just back to the main motion as amended. Okay, so I will call the question on that. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Okay. All right. Is there anything further before we move on? All right, so we're on to 10B, which is the expansion of the Lantzville Road Water Main Upgrade Project. And this is for information, so we have Director Spears. If there's any questions. Councilor Lerner, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to thank staff for the turnaround on this, and just to make sure that I understand correctly, it looks like basically there was a contingency fund and this is a small amount to add the 2 water connections. So that's being done within the budget of the contingency fund. Is that correct?
Through your worship to council, yes, that is correct.
Excellent. Thank you.
Anything further? Councilor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, I have a motion, please, emanating from this information report.
Okay, go ahead.
That council, and sorry, I don't have it written down, it's very short though, Director Coates, that council direct staff to proceed with installing 2 surface water outlets on each side of Lantzville Road as part of the new water pipe installation project on Lantzville Road.
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
Yeah, that council direct staff to proceed with installing 2 surface water outlets on each side of Lantzville Road as part of the new water pipe installation project on Lantzville Road.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? Second by Councilor Mundell. Discussion on the motion. Oh, sorry, Councilor Savage.
Yeah, this is just simply an extension. That's great. We found out that it will be minimal cost in terms of the whole project, that it can be done. So now we're just following up to make that motion to do it. And this will be a wonderful addition to major walking route to and from our village. And most importantly, when I'm old and tired, I can stop and feel the cool water on my hands on a hot summer day. And I can look back on one little thing that I accomplished in my life. And when I'm with my granddaughter walking through the village, she'll say, "Grandmaster, do we have to go visit those water taps again?" And I'll say, "Yes, if you want your hot chocolate and treats." So thank you.
Okay, so Director Coates.
So just for clarity, the staff report had referred to staff installing it near, on the north and south sides of Lantzville Road near Harper Road, so they were proceeding with that. So is that still the location? Did you want that in the motion? Because it's a bit broad right now.
No, if that's the understanding, that's fine. I don't even know if a motion's necessary. I'm just doing it so it's clear. That's what we'd like, that's all, so. And Harper
I think if
Road's
we're doing a
great.
motion, we should put the near Harper Road, so it's clear.
Okay, we can add that amendment then, please, near Harper Road at the end of the motion. Thank you.
So just by unanimous consent, unless somebody objects, we'll go with that. Okay, so no objections. Councilor Mundell?
Just a question. There was a mention that there would be one on each side of the road? Is that correct? Just curious then if maybe, I don't know, could they be staggered so they're not right?
Director Spears has his hand up, so Director Spears?
Yes, your worship. Apologies, I probably should have jumped in here a little bit sooner. It's my understanding that you're wanting to put 2 taps on both sides of the road that anybody can come along and get water from. Is that correct?
Yes, that's to allow that, but that's to be determined later, or irrigation for plants and so on. So it's just to have a pipe so we can allow that in the future, or if it's a tap, that would be fine with me.
Yeah, sorry, but the motion that you're making now is instructing me to install a tap, if I'm not mistaken. And just with that motion, I'm not sure if I can carry that out. The health department may have issues with just open taps being on the water line. So there's a bunch of things that I have to look into before I can actually carry out the will of council on that motion in particular, because there might be other powers that won't allow it. So just to kind of let everybody know that it may not be able to be happening. I will come back to council if that's the case.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a further amendment then, please, just pending a report from Director Spears.
Okay. And we'll have need a seconder, so I'll second that. So seconded by Mayor Swain. Any further discussion? So we're just made an amendment. Okay, I'll call the question on amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Now we're back to the main motion as amended. Anything further? Councillor Jones?
Thank you through the chair to Director Spears. Just a question, please. Is your concern with the word tap because the tap can be turned on and left on, and that what might be more appropriate is something like when you are at a water fountain and you have to push a button to get the water? Or is there a reason that I'm not seeing here that you might enlighten us with? Thank you.
Sure. There's potential for contamination when you just have something of a tap or something of that nature that people can access. And there's also the very real threat of abuse. We have in the past actually caught some people connecting into their neighbor's garden hose and filling up tanks and that kind of stuff. And that's one of the concerns that we always have is you know, I understand that it's a little far-fetched and we never thought it would happen, but it's happened to our hydrants, it's happened to people's houses. So we always have to be cognizant of all of that, what we're making available to certain individuals. So.
Okay, Councillor Lerner?
Yes, thank you through your worship to staff. Just curious as to whether there are certain standards that are generally used. So for example, if it's a spring-loaded tap, if it's something where it requires a particular key to turn on or anything like that, are there certain standards the district uses to avoid those sorts of situations of abuse and being left on and things like that?
Yes, through your worship. Basically, I mean, you can look at Huddlestone Park. We actually have to keep that one locked up because we found people were connecting into it and abusing it, taking water from there. So there's several things that have to happen. One of them in particular is that there has to be double check valves put on everything so that there's no chance of contamination from anybody attaching it to it. And then, of course, we've never dealt with anything like this before to actually have taps on the side of a road for people to access. So this is all new territory for me. So I'm going to have to ask the Island Health some questions on it before we move forward.
Okay, I think that's all very reasonable. Unless there's anything further, I'm going to move to calling the question. Okay, all those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Okay, that takes us on to item 12. So we have mayor and council verbal updates. So I guess we'll start down that end tonight. So Councillor Mundell, if you wish.
Just a short update, just noting the most recent weather and some of the challenges that have come along with everybody trying to get out of their driveways today. Some positives from that are that every time this happens or every snowfall we get, we have a neighbor that struggles with cleaning and clearing their driveway, so we kind of just take it upon ourselves to go and help them out. And it's just a nice time to give back to the community in a small way, and also to connect, because it's kind of our only time where we actually get to catch up. So just a little reminder for folks, if you can look out for your neighbors and see if somebody needs getting pushed out of a ditch or a hand here and there.
Counselor Savage.
Yes, thanks. Good point, Councillor Mundell. So for mine, it's just because this is so timely, just through to staff, are there any updates on the RDN taking over our bylaw enforcement services at this point in terms of being willing to, and if there's cutoff dates? Thank you.
Your Worship, we have talked to the RDN. They're going to send a proposal to us, and we haven't got that yet.
Okay. And is there an expectation that you might have a report ready by December 7th as our somewhat last chance before the new year?
Yes.
That's a yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Oh, it will be December 7th?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much.
Counselor Jones.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Counselor Lerner.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, congratulations on everyone for getting through the storm and coming here tonight. Thank you for everyone attending. I know it's been a bit of a trek. I just want to give my kudos to the Rotary Club of Lantzville, Lantzville Fire Department, and Lantzville Firefighters Association for their 12th annual food drive. Great job. I heard it was a wonderful success. Also, kudos to the Legion. They had their annual general meeting this week. I attended, and congratulations to the new executives that were elected. I'm sure we'll see great things from them. And of course, it's a wonderful time of year, lots of holidays coming up, but it can also be difficult for a lot of people. So when we hear about the food drive and we hear about toy drives and everything like that, there are resources available if anyone in the community needs them. So don't be afraid to reach out to your neighbors and your community. So thank you.
And that just leaves myself. I guess one thing that also occurred on the weekend was the Christmas market. So hosted by the Seaside Community Society, and it looked like it was a banner year for them, and it seemed like it was heavily attended. So lots of new vendors by the looks of it as well. So well done on that front. And then just in terms of through council, congratulations for making it through November. It's been a busy month. And we got a busy beginning of December as well, right up to almost the middle of December. So, and then just a reminder, this Friday we'll have the unveiling of the new public art installment in the front of the building. So for those who are able to attend, please attend. I think it's at 3 p.m., correct? Yeah, 3 p.m. Friday afternoon. And other than that, I'll leave it at that. So that takes us on to item 12B, so we have bylaw 175. So Councilor Lerner, you have a recommendation, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'd like to make the motion that staff bring forward for the December 7th, 2022 regular meeting of council, quote, District of Lantzville Subdivision and Development Works and Services Bylaw number 175, 2020, end quote, for review, discussion, and potential amendment motions. And further that staff provide a report for consideration at the January 11th, 2023 regular council meeting that outlines options for wording in, quote, District of Lantzville Subdivision and Development Works and Services Bylaw number 175, 2020, end quote, that would remove the road standards of major metropolitan cityscapes and instead encourages semi-rural style designs incorporating such elements as permeable walkways, natural pollutant filtering, rain garden requirements, and a preference for nature-based solutions to stormwater management in subdivisions, all possibly to be continued via special meetings in the near future.
Is there a seconder? Second by Councilor Savage. Discussion on the motion, so through to Councilor Lerner.
Yes, thank you. I did include a report with the motion, which I believe is on the agenda beginning on page 92. Basically, I think that this is timely for a couple of reasons. The first part of the motion is primarily an information part on bylaw 175. It's a complex and bylaw, and by bringing it forward on December 7th, it will allow council to ask questions, discuss it, review it ahead of our first priority session. And I think that that's important because it's our priorities based on the discussions we've had here at council. Sounds like there could be priorities that have implications for bylaw 175. So that's the first part of the motion. The second part is for a report from staff. It's an opportunity. I made it for January to give more time. Just an opportunity for us as a semi-rural community to look at alternatives to concrete sidewalks or the asphalt sidewalks, see what's happening, for example, in other communities where we're seeing recycled rubber, permeable pavers, gravel. These alternatives are in use. So it's just an opportunity for council to get a report from staff on what those alternatives might be, whether they're feasible, what the costs might be, and then to ask questions and to learn. And again, this is in the midst of our priority sessions, so I feel it's very timely and just gives us an opportunity for information and review, discussion, feedback, that sort of thing. So I believe that that's a timely matter. Thank you.
Through the seconder, if you wish.
Thank you. Yes, I've been interested in road standards and designs for many decades myself, and I've just observed these new urban road style designs. For me, they have problems, and when I look at our former rural road designs, they're free from problems from all my observations. And when you have the rural road design, for example, on my road that leads to my house, I've seen over 60 cars parked neat as a pin all the way up the side of the road. And because it's a rural design, there's roadside parking. Whereas on this new urban design, I've seen many times on Spence's Way, delivery trucks and so on are straddling the road, their wheels on the sidewalk and half on the road, so they can find a place to park to conduct their business. So to me, and look at all the snow we're getting now. Rural roads, it's so simple. You just plow it off to the side of the road. All that snow melts into the ground. It doesn't clog up drains and so on. A third reason are all this direction of going with the big pipes everywhere. There's just so many downsides to that for me. If we can naturally drain things into the ground, we're replenishing the water table. That's the first thing. We're cleaning out the contaminants using nature. If everything is put in a big pipe, eventually we're going to end up with a Lantzville that's depriving our water table from replenishing, and we're going to have tinder dry areas in Lantzville due to drought, where the water table is not getting replenished and it's not allowing for a moist ground. So I really want to look into this, and the style is so much prettier when you've got green shoulders. When there's no cars there, it looks pretty, and when you need parking, like on our Armistice Day, Remembrance Day rather, which is our big event of the year, we can have endless cars flooding Lantzville Road and so on, and there's parking everywhere to accommodate this. I've very often in the past parked way up Lantzville Road. This will all be gone if we follow the Sabrina subdivision trend. That's a sidewalk that's jutting out into the road. And when we discussed this in January 2020, I brought up specifically Colette Road as an example, and I was told that roads like that will remain rural, yet the former planner turned that into an urban road and requested the new subdivision there to put a sidewalk stranded out on the road, which council turned down. Nevertheless, I really want as many rural roads as possible. That's sort of my thinking on this, and it seems from Councillor Lerner's report, that's what he's looking at too, the possibility of going to almost exclusively rural roads, and if there's exception for the main roads, we certainly can look at that. I'm a very practical person, but And the other thing with road standards are they include street lighting, and I'm hoping we go to a style with smaller lamp posts and lower wattage. An example is the foothills. That section of Harwood that leads up to the foothills simply has those low lights. They're 14 watts, and they light up the road ambiently as they're lighting up the sidewalk. And I'd like to see more of that low, dark sky lighting. I don't consider 70-watt LED lights on really big street posts as dark sky lighting at all. And we've just seen, thank you to Director Hare, the comparison of streetlights. There's been no reduction in cost in Hydra that I can see since we put in the LED lights. So I'm hoping we transition to lower wattage in our road standards so we can get some savings there as well. So that's basically it. Not to prescribe anything, but to invite Director Spears to look into this just to see how feasible it is to do as many of the rural road style as possible with the drainage in the ground and swales and parking on both sides. And that doesn't deprive a walkway either. So thank you.
Additional comments? Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Gosh, this is a situation where we can kind of have our cake and eat it too, because this community has spoken quite loudly through the official community plan to say that it's very important to them to retain some of the semi-rural character of Lantzville. And at the same time, we are being faced with larger rain events and various, climate change things, droughts and heat waves and whatnot. And our Assessment BC has been working for almost 10 years now on sustainable asset management. This started with Gibson's. It's been in the news recently, back in 2014, to see how natural assets can be used. And it's grown. Over 100 communities in British Columbia have started looking at sustainable asset management and using semi-rural roads and the natural infrastructure that they offer is key. I highly recommend going to Asset Management BC and checking out their documents recently updated for municipal planners, really helping them inventory and design, these new systems which we need in the upcoming years for many reasons. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments, debate? All right, I'm going to move to call in the question then. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. It takes us on to item 12C. So this is 7220 Ware Road and 7133 Lantzville Road drainage. So this is Councillor Jones' recommendation. So go ahead, Councillor Jones.
Thank you. That staff ensure there's no ongoing increase in historical water drainage flow from the Village South property into either the Wiles Creek to Jack's Beach drainage system or the Lancewood to Huddlestone Beach drainage system in consideration of the extensive drainage works currently being conducted on Village South. And further, that staff establish a baseline outflow reflecting historical outflow volumes from the Village South property in order to determine if there are outflow increases from the current Village South drainage works and if there are outflow increases in the future.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? Okay, second by Councillor Mundell. Discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you. A high priority should be placed on concerns raised by residents following the recent ditch work on Village South property. Will the increase in water draining from Village South overburden the district's drainage system? Will it have consequences for residents and their properties? Over the years, during heavy rain events, residents have witnessed flooding along the Wiles Creek to Jack's Beach drainage system. Culverts were damaged, water ran where it should not flow, including onto private properties. Storm water runoff increased after the owner clear-cut about 57 acres in 2018 on Village South. It will increase again as the recent ditch work in Village South includes new ditches, deepening of existing ditches, and the addition of smaller tributary ditches designed to drain water from wet areas that have been retaining water. The water collected will flow into the Wiles Creek to Jack's drainage system or into the Lantzwood to Huddlestone drainage system. Of concern is that one or both these drainage systems, built and maintained by the district at taxpayer expense, will not be able to accommodate the additional flow or any increased speed of flow from the Village South, especially during heavy rain events. The consequences could be costly to the district, pose a safety risk to residents, and damage properties. One approach to addressing this concern requires monitoring and recording of stormwater flow in several locations. On April 20th, this motion was discussed by the previous council. I quote, that the District of Lantzville start the monitoring and recording of stormwater flow at Jacks Road and Huddlestone Road outflows, end quote. Council's decision was that this motion be referred to staff to provide cost estimates for equipment, hydrologists, and continuous testing. The problem is that this has not been done. We do not yet have the requested cost estimates for monitoring data. The concern over flooding is now an urgent matter as we go into the winter rainy season. I am confident that our planners can provide us very soon with significant data recording regarding flow prior to the clear cutting in 2018 and with data post clear cut and before the recent ditch work on Village South. I am also confident that the increase in stormwater due to recent ditch work can be estimated. This would include all rainwater that falls on the low-lying wet areas of Village South, areas that used to retain water that will now drain into the new ditches. This will enable council to consider a plan that prevents additional stormwater from flowing into the existing district system and potentially harming residents and properties. Thank you.
Okay. Additional comments, debate? Okay, Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, there are many new deep ditches have been created on Village South. One is over 10 feet deep. A person working on this ditching stated the owner had told them to drain the property. So this is pretty well a guarantee that the flow will increase. This means the flat areas of this property are no longer providing their historical natural function as water retention areas. These flat areas are at the bottom of large sloped areas going all the way up to the foothills. Buyers of such property should know this and not shift the responsibility of handling this water to the district. Going forward, it's important we preserve such water retention areas. The viewpoint that every property in Lantzville has the right to be developed to the maximum and has the right to produce maximum profit, this viewpoint cannot be shared by responsible councils. It's our job to look at the community holistically and preserve useful environmental areas like natural water retention areas. They're very valuable. It's not our job to maximize the profit of a landowner. Completely eradicating the ecosystem of entire properties, then piping the eventual more and more contaminated drainage water over time to the beach should be an unacceptable standard for Lantzville. Such water retention areas provide valuable environmental functions like preventing flooding, fueling the water table, and helping to keep parts of the community from becoming tinder dry during periods of drought and fire risk. All this retained water is now being drained, which obviously will increase the flow to Wiles Creek. This has three negatives. One, it increases the risk of flooding downstream. Two, these deep ditches will sometimes contain considerable volumes of cold flowing water, which may pose a safety risk to kids. However, a thank you to Public Works for persuading Village South to fix the most hazardous deep clay ditch, which is now much safer and shallower. The historical ditches were small in both number and shallow. They were quite insignificant in terms of safety and flow before. So the third problem is this creates a new baseline of flow, which will be a sizable increase in flow. So when the policy of pre-development flow must equal post-development flow, what is going on is a de facto increase in post-development flow being created right now. And number four, a couple of weeks ago, number four problem, a couple of weeks ago, the water flowing into the Lantzville and Huddlestone Beach drainage system was gray due to all the clay silt in the water. We can now see just how much clay permeates the north region of Village South. So perhaps there's two solutions moving forward, perhaps. One is to eventually create development permit areas for water retention. Another solution may be to create a bylaw to disallow large vacant properties from substantially increasing downstream flooding risks by substantially increasing the water flow from their properties. And just to finish, I think it's council's duty if we see a potential increased risk coming up, it's up to us to try to mitigate it. And the heavy rains haven't hit yet. And with all this increased flow going into Wiles Creek, we already had a flooding event that luckily did not harm any property last year. It was just an overflowing culvert, that's all. But it's just we don't want to risk properties downstream. Thank you.
Additional speakers on this item? All right, I'll just briefly comment. My concern has always been around the pre versus post-development flows. And perhaps maybe the language is not correct in terms of looking at it just in terms of development or looking at it in terms of like after the fact, like after things have been subdivided and roads have gone in, houses have being built and so forth. I have kind of shifted my thinking more to, you know, after there has been a land improvement. And some people may argue, well, you know, some of this activities may not hardly constitute improvements, but maybe further damaging the land and so forth. But again, any augmentation to the purpose or use of the land should be considered when, you know, we're looking at the post effect or the, you know, the post flow that's coming off that property. So really my question to Director Spears is, you know, what can we do to mitigate, you know, like as you know, there is land changes or improvements, I guess we'll have to call them, being made. How can we mitigate the increased runoff? Because technically there shouldn't be any increased runoff if we're adhering to that concept, pre versus post development flows should be equal. So what can we do to mitigate, you know, the development process or land
Your worship,
improvements?
I think one of the issues before us right now is that what's happened is not considered development. It was considered land maintenance of sorts, which you know I disagree with. I mean, there was some major works done on the property. I think Councillor Savage might have touched on one of the things that could come up in the future. Is to have a bylaw in place, pardon me, a bylaw in place to actually mitigate that actually from happening. And the other portion of it could be a development permit requirement to alter water courses on properties. Those are the kind of things that, I mean, I think we have to look at for going forward. As it stands right now, there's not a lot of teeth out there for us to actually take action on this type of stuff. So one of the things, I guess, in the motion, it identifies that staff ensure there is no ongoing increase. Staff can't ensure that. I would love to be able to say yes, yeah, no problem, we can ensure that. But with the problem is that there's the events that we have, the rain events that we have increases the flow and then it decreases the flow. So there's always that increase and decrease all the time. So to ensure there's no ongoing increase, we can't do that because of the weather that we have going on. There's no doubt that the weather has been changing over the last 10 years for sure. So I think for us to ensure that there's no ongoing increase in historical water drainage is kind of difficult. However, what we can do is have a hydrologist take a look at the catchment areas for those areas and come up with an actual identify what they see as going in, because I mean there's a lot of different factors go on when you're talking about groundwater and flow. You're talking about, you know, the rain events, how often the rain events happen, you know, the percentage that you put in as a safety factor, and the hydrologist knows all of this stuff that goes on, so that there is all of that. And I think one of the first steps that we're going to have to take is to get a hydrologist in to have a look at the overall picture and give us an estimate, as Councillor Jones has indicated, that we're going to have an estimate of what the flow actually is, and they could probably come up with an estimate of what the flow was prior to any works going on the property as well. So that's kind of where I'll leave it.
Okay. So further comment, debate from council? Councillor Savage?
Yes, through chair to staff, is possible Director Spear's staff could present a development permit area or a bylaw that could prevent such things in the future, and this one as well, where certain works cannot be done which substantially increase drainage into our drainage system or put risk to downstream properties. However, have you got any suggestions there? What would be the best approach?
Through your worship to council, I'm not a planner, so the development permit process probably would best be answered by Director Limshu. However, I think the development permit process is probably the best option, and it would cover off the actual, it would cover off quicker the actual issues that are surrounding with, you know, the changing of water courses and such. Even if they're considered drainage areas, a drainage area is a water course. So if that's, you know, if you're looking for something that can happen quickly, that's probably your best option.
Getcha. Thanks very much. Well, council can perhaps think on that, as well as staff. If we could follow up with Director Limshu, that would be great, to see if a solution could be done, and maybe a verbal report or some such thing, if possible, by December 7th before the rains hit, would be great. Thank you.
So just for council's benefit, there is a staff recommendation or replacement motion that follows Councillor Jones' proposed recommendations. And I believe this is what staff or Director Spears is indicating, you know, if we want to do anything, we have to do it through bylaw. So without that, nothing's really going to change. So in terms of the, you know, Councillor Jones's recommendation, with no disrespect, I see those as being more whereas kind of clauses. But I think really the motion that will get something done in the interim is follows in the staff recommendation. And then also, you know, in terms of the monitoring, trying to figure out how to do that, again, it's going to require probably some investigation of staff and to also report back on everything from just the resourcing of it, how much time, how much money, that sort of stuff. Was this something we can do internally, or we're gonna have to go to a consultant to do and so forth? But I don't want to be too pragmatic about this. I think in the interim, probably the best solution is to look at any kind of regulatory bylaws to prevent this kind of thing from happening, because like I think I've pointed out, when there's changes being made to, you know, basically the raw land, we'll call it, that are potentially causing detrimental downstream effects, right now, there's no mechanism to stop that. Really, there isn't. So a person can get in their big old whatever backhoe and dig all the ditches they want. There's nothing you can do to stop them from doing that. So, and then if all of a sudden the flow starts increasing off our lot, then there's nothing we can do to really stop that. You know, if an individual landowner wants to create liability for themselves, that's probably a for sure way of doing it. Because if it does start flooding out people's homes downstream, well, all you gotta do is look upstream to find out the source and then go after them, right? So, but I think in the interim, probably what is listed below as a staff recommendation is probably the best place to start. So I'll leave my comments there. Councillor Jones, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Swain and Director Spears. That's been an excellent discussion, and I think I can propose an amendment to this motion that will satisfy it all. I'll give it a stab, and I'm sure I'll get a little help if need be. That staff then strike from ensure all the way down to and further that. So strike all of that, so it reads that staff establish a baseline outflow reflecting historical outflow volumes from the Village South property in order to determine if there are outflow increases from the current Village South drainage works and if there are outflow increases in the future. And further that, and then add the staff motion, which Mayor Swain has just referred to. So it will read, and further that, as Phase 1, staff investigate any regulatory bylaw options regarding on-site drainage and provide a report to council before council considers as Phase 2 drainage flow monitoring from the Village South property. And then I would like to put a timeline on that. I think that would be advisable because this is fairly potentially an urgent matter. Thank you, Councillor Savage. If you're going to.
So, okay, so we got the amendment. Did you?
I did not get all of it. So
Okay.
it's that the motion on the floor be amended by striking from the word ensure down to the word staff, and by adding and further that as Phase 1. So does it go right through from Phase 1 right through to property?
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And seconded by, was that Councillor Savage? Yeah, seconded by Councillor Savage. Discussion on the amendment. So Councillor Jones.
Yes, I think this addresses the concern from Director Spears about insuring. And I think it also addresses the excellent points made by Councillor Savage and Mayor Swain. So let's just get this far, then I think there'll be a lot more to discuss when we have some information from this. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, this is, I think, answers it. Even if it's a rudimentary analysis of generally what the flow is now. For example, the neighbor to the little half pipe that leads to Lantzville has said that she's never seen that overflow in 15 years, or was it 30 years? I forget which, the 15 years that she's lived there. So there's some empirical data that, you know, using such things like that. So if suddenly that little half pipe is very much overflowing, putting that house at risk, then one will know that very likely it's increased. So I would like to see at least some rudimentary baseline. And the very simple reason for this is right in our policy. It states that pre-development outflow must be the same as post-development outflow. Well, if we don't have a clue what that is, it's a pointless policy. It's a meaningless policy. So that's why we have to establish some system of measuring pre-development flow to post-development flow for all these drainage systems. So I know it can be done. It can be done in a rudimentary way right up to actually measuring the flow sometimes of the air. There's some interesting ways they do it, even timing a floating piece of wood in the outlet, see how long it takes, et cetera, et cetera. So there's ways to do it. So I'd like to see at least this started, even if it's rudimentary at the start. Thank you.
Director Spears, I noticed your hand is up.
Yes, through your worship, to council, I think we have to be careful when we're talking about rudimentary calculations and finding out how things are going, because what we really want to do is have that information backed up, because we're going to be looking at penalizing those individuals for doing such works. So we're going to have actual scientific facts, and a baseline from a specific engineer would actually allow us to utilize that when writing tickets and going forth and such. So I just want to caution council on the when we're talking rudimentary stuff. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Director Coates?
So I think I got the amendment, but there was mention of adding a date, and I didn't get that. And then there was also the issue of, because they're getting combined, I think staff had originally thought if their motion was done when they brought the report, they would be providing information on how much it would cost to get the baseline information that you were looking for the hydrologist and the equipment and all of that. So I'm not sure, maybe Director Spears can comment on what would happen by, or if that affects the date by which the report could come.
Well, I'll just offer a preliminary thought on the first half of the motion, because if staff, I think rightfully can do this, it comes back to council and says, well, if we're going to do this, this is what we recommend, and there's going to be a cost associated with that. That's what I'm already anticipating is going to happen. And likely at that point, staff would probably be seeking approval for council to move forward. So as far as I'm concerned, the first half of the motion may not be perfect, but I think it serves its purpose in directing staff to start that process. And I'm sure that we're probably going to get a report back saying this is what it's going to take to start this process. It's going to be a significant undertaking. There's going to be significant costs associated with it in terms of the resourcing, and I think one way or another we're going to get probably the same information. This is probably maybe a faster way to it, because it just forces the issue that we want it to be monitored starting now. But I do recognize that staff is probably not in a position even to action that. But we will get that information coming back to tell us that they can action it and the reasons why. And there's probably going to be some monetary reasons around this resourcing. Councillor Lerner?
Yes, I support the amendment with a date, and so I guess my question through your worship to Director Spears is what you would recommend for a date to receive a report on the options that are being requested for phase 1 and 2.
Through your worship, I think probably either the first or second meeting in January, we probably should be able to have something back by then. Hopefully the first, but for sure the second meeting.
So just to understand, looking at the calendar, the first meeting in January that is a regular meeting, I believe, is January the 11th.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Councillor Lerner, did you want to make that amendment then? Or actually, so we're already on an amendment?
We're still having an amendment.
Yeah, so let's deal with that amendment. And so is there anything further on the amendment we're dealing with at the moment? Okay, all right, Councillor Jones, go ahead.
Just very briefly, we've been talking about measuring the flow at different places. I'd just like to also reiterate that when you drain an area that has been retaining water, we will now need to know how large that area is, project heavy rain events to get an estimate of how much additional water is now going to be going into the ditch. That's an important part of the future calculation. So that's all, just a clarification.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna move then, call in the question on the amendment. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Now we're back to the main motion as amended. Councillor Lerner, if you wish to make the further amendment.
Yes, I would just like to add, I'm not, I'm trying to figure out exactly how it's worded right now, but basically, I think it's in the second part that as Phase 1 staff investigate any regulatory bylaw options regarding on-site drainage and provide a report to council, and then I would say, insert for the regular council meeting of January 11th, 2023. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Savage. Discussion on the amendment, just regarding the reporting time. Okay, I'll move to call in the question then. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Now we're back to the main motion as further amended. Anything else? Okay, hearing or seeing nothing, I'll move to call in the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Now we're on to item 12D, which is the preservation of trees. So Councillor Jones, you have a recommendation listed there if you wish. And it's just after, therefore be it resolved that.
Therefore, be it resolved that the Director of Planning give a verbal report at the December 7, 2022 council meeting on how it is possible to preserve more trees in subdivisions before the upcoming tree bylaw has been approved.
Is there a seconder to this motion? Seconded by Councillor Lerner for discussion. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. The goal of this motion here is to start moving away from the practice of clear cutting prior to development and to save trees on properties approved for development and protect this valuable natural asset by retaining and protecting trees. We know that this is a natural asset worthy of protection. The ground they put the roots in is a valuable sink for carbon dioxide. They provide shade and cool air during heat waves. They're a habitat for nature. They're good for physical and mental health. They can provide sound barriers to traffic. They can provide privacy for neighbors, and that's just a few of the things that come to mind. We'll soon take the tree bylaw closer to perfection, but in the meantime, we have a problem, in my opinion, which is that subdivisions with a development permit, 1 acre or less, are exempt from the tree bylaw. So it's the intention to discourage clear cutting prior to development, hence this motion. Thank you.
And through the seconder, if you wish.
Yes, just that I believe we're going to be working diligently as is staff on perfecting the tree bylaw. In the meantime, getting this verbal report, I think, will give us options and a clearer understanding of what's possible and what's not to prevent clear cutting. I do have one question through your worship to staff, which is the date at which we think we may see the next iteration of the tree bylaw.
I believe that will be at the first meeting in January.
Okay, thank you. So I appreciate that. So getting this December 7th update is important because if we see the first iteration January 11th, then of course there'll be time for public input, amendments, readings, adoptions, et cetera, et cetera. So having this update on December 7th will give us a little bit of an overview of our options in the meantime and going forward. So I support the motion. Thank you.
All right, I was just gonna speak to this next, just real briefly. In terms of, I like this motion because it's simple. It's just asking for a verbal report, more or less, just getting some ideas from our planning staff about what could be done to preserve more trees, like during the whole building process or land clearing subdivision process. I'm sure there's got to be some tips out there or some suggestions on how we can entice land developers to preserve more trees as they're building. Some kind of incentive system. So I don't know what the right carrot is for this, but I'd really like to hear from our planning staff on and what their ideas are, and maybe that would stimulate some motions of council or future motions of council or possible amendments to the upcoming tree bylaw, or even just get that discussion going. So generally can support this. So anything further from others? Councillor Savage?
Yes, this is one small step to improving our development standards, is to encourage the retention of some trees throughout development properties. Generally speaking, all the in-ground services go from the road to the house, so leaving some trees in the lots can be done. This is what the 4-lot subdivision on Colette did. The half-acre lots, 3 of them were sold with trees on them. And this can be desirable for buyers and can also increase the value of the property when they're sold. So granting a development permit the way it works now should not be an automatic license to forested properties to then clear cut the property. I really would like to get away from this. And if we have upcoming development permits being issued where there's going to be clear cutting, my hope is that the planning department can proactively, knowing, council's desire coming up, as they can ensure that there are trees there. So in my view, all future development should have clusters of housing mixed with clusters of green space with trails. It's a much better design than this cookie cutter subdivisions that are just so common, so plain, so not Lantzville. They lack character. I think that's the way to go. So I'll look forward to hearing what some solutions are. Thank you.
Anything further from council? All right, I'm going to move to call in question then. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. It takes us on to item 12E. So this is 6671 and 6685-6685B Harwood Drive parking
As a
lot amendment.
point of order, please, Mayor Swain.
Yeah, what's your point of order?
I'll be leaving the meeting due to perceived or real conflict due to my property being proximity of my property to this one. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so this is the parking lot amenity. Councillor Jones, this is your recommendation, if you wish. No, that's fine.
Would you like me to begin it? Therefore
Just
be it
from,
resolved?
where it's
Therefore be it
the actual
resolved.
motion, not the whereas clauses.
Yep. Therefore be it resolved that council directs staff to not proceed with the required parking lot amenity as agreed to in the rezoning of 6671 and 6685B Harwood Drive. And further, that staff provide a report for council consideration of the options of 1, cash in lieu of the parking lot community amenity, or 2, propose an alternate location that does not require cutting down as many trees, either of which would be subject to staff working with the applicant to amend the restrictive covenant for the preferred option.
Okay, is there a seconder to this motion? Second by Councillor Mundell. Discussion on the motion. Through to you, Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you. This really is very simple. The intent of this motion is to minimize the loss of Lantzville's tree canopy, which sadly has been rapidly disappearing in recent years. Given that all of the district property plan for this parking lot is currently covered in trees. Furthermore, the proposed parking area will not provide a significant increase in the existing parking, just a few spaces more than what is currently available. So my hope is that our planners can consider additional parking in another location And an ideal location may be the paved area on the right side of Harwood Road, just after the Ware Alds Road intersection. This area is currently paved, so there won't be a whole lot of trees to take down. And if used for parking, there will be a beautiful walk along the new pathway that is planned that will connect to the Copley Ridge trails. If that area is not suitable for a parking lot and no other one can be found, then the cash in lieu option would be the one to consider if it's possible legislatively for staff to request the estimated cost to clearing and constructing a parking lot in the planned location. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mundell is a seconder if you wish.
Yeah, I can support this for folks who are going to access that amazing trail system. I don't think that they would appreciate cutting down and destroying some of that area that they're going to visit and to get into nature. So just so that they can park their car there, and it makes sense to me to put cars where there aren't trees now, and that there's already an area ready to support vehicle parking, and it's not that much further from the trailhead already. And let's face it, you go there to go walk for a walk, so a little bit more further walk doesn't seem that ridiculous to me. So yeah, I mean, we're all about preserving as much of our, as we like to call it, our natural resources, and so I just can't see why carving out a chunk of this area for a parking lot would be necessary, so I definitely support this.
Councillor Lerner, go ahead.
Yes, I'll be supporting this motion. I think we've all heard the saying of paving paradise to put up a parking lot, and in this case, that's, I think, what we're looking at, the possibility of preventing is, right now we have trees, and if there's an alternative location that works at that would be fantastic. And if not, cash in lieu, if that's possible, we can have our cake and eat it too, preserve the trees and get the cash. So I think this motion makes sense. So thank you.
Yeah, for myself, I can support this motion. It's given us some options, that's for sure. So with respect to the where the proposed parking lot's going, I'm not totally sure of the area, like how large that area is, and also even just the site itself and how many trees would actually come down in the creation of that parking lot. The other thing to take into consideration is at the end of that road on either side, there will be in the future 2 quarter-acre parcels of parkland, and so there's the frontage of those 2 lots that can have cars parked in front of them, and then I think we can also look at that road or the extension of Ald's Road there, and look at are there some other alternatives there for creating increased parking there without having to take down trees. So yeah, it makes all good sense to me. And the cash in lieu or whatever comes out of that could go towards the costs of creating this other parking. But I do agree with council. It's why would we be taking down more trees, or we're trying to preserve them? And I do recognize the head of that trail is, from what I understand, is in a district of Lantzville road right away. So, but just because it's a road right away doesn't mean we have to nuke the trees and take them all down. So if we have mature trees there, why not leave them until they come down naturally, or they have to get taken down because they're a risk or a hazard. So unless there's anything further, I'll move to calling the question. All those in favor? And it's carried unanimously. So we can have Councillor Savage brought back. Noting at 7:54, Councillor Savage's return to the meeting. We're on to item 12F. So we have the community amenity contributions document. There's a background document included in the agenda, and this is Councillor Savage's recommendation. So through to you, Councillor Savage.
Thank you. That staff bring forward the community amenity contributions document approved by Council June 15th, 2020 to the December 7th, 2022 Council meeting for Council to consider amendments, including but not limited to increasing the target financial community amenity contribution of $3,000 per new additional parcel or primary dwelling unit.
Is there a seconder to the motion? Seconded by Mayor Swain, for good old time's sake.
For old time's sake.
Yeah. All right, Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, we've got a week to think about this. Do we want to increase the 3,000 amount I just mentioned? And are there amenities on the list on page 98 of the agenda, section 20, that you would like to delete? Or are there other ones you would like to add? So it's as simple as that. It's nice to have a full heads up that this is coming up. So that's basically all it is. Thank you.
As a seconder, I'll forgo my speaking opportunity at this time. Is there anything further? Councillor Lerner?
Yes, I can support this. I think it's great to bring the document forward for council's consideration. And as well, I think that it says, that there's a possibility at that time of discussing an increase to the community asset contribution. We can discuss it further, if this passes and is brought forward to December 7th. But just for background information, Nanaimo, including the north area near Lantzville, went through a review of their community asset contributions recently, and they're seeing an increase to the point where $3,000 per unit is the baseline for a single residential dwelling, $2,500 per unit for townhouse residential dwelling, and next year it goes up. Or sorry, in January of 2023. So any day now, it's going to go up to $4,200 per unit of the single dwelling, $6,000 next year, and $8,000 in 2025. So I think it's definitely worth having a review. It's timely. Other communities are doing this, so bringing it forward for discussion, I think, is worthwhile, and we'll just get more information and input, especially as we head into our priority session. So thank you.
Excellent. Anything further? All right. And for myself, and I've kind of harped on this many times in the past, none of this development would be happening if it wasn't for water. And, this previous council made significant contributions on the community's behalf towards water, neighborhood of $2 million. So that's between the Nanaimo Lantzville Water Agreement, enacting that, as well as doing interconnection design and putting interconnection in so we can actually take Nanaimo water. Without that, none of this would be possible. I've always looked at that as being an investment in our community. It's $2 million. It does give us redundancy in water. But with that, I think, with community providing such fantastic infrastructure, there should be some return on that and recovery of costs. The developers shouldn't just be simply profiting out the wazoo as the housing costs go up significantly, and they have gone up significantly in the last 2 years. So since this was enacted, or we had this document, and we've felt, I think in the past year anyways, the $3,000 per door is a little light compared to, if we had to go through the whole water agreement and even doing the interconnection thing and building it in today's standards, it would have cost us a lot more. Or most definitely. So anyways, everything's got to go up, and including this. And I don't see this as being an adverse, increase in its costs, or considering the increase in its costs having an adverse effect on housing affordability. Not at all. So it's just a cost of doing business, just like we spent $2 million of Lantzville's money to increase the water capacity, cost of doing business. So And unless there's anything further, I do like the idea of bringing this back and having a more fulsome discussion on the 7th. So anything further? All right, I will move to call into question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. That takes us on to G, which is bylaw number 172. So this is the District of Lantzville Officers Indemnification and Delegation Bylaw 172, 2018. It's being provided by staff in the agenda. This is Councillor Savage's recommendation. So go ahead, Councillor Savage.
Yes, this is similar to the last one. That staff bring forward District of Lantzville Officers Indemnification and Delegation Bylaw number 172, 2018, a bylaw to establish officers' positions, provide indemnification for members of council, officers, and employees, and delegate certain authorities to the December 7th, 2022 council meeting for council to consider amendments.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Lerner for discussion. Councillor Savage, if you wish.
Yes, thank you. This is being done a little bit of an odd way. We just did the Parkland one because it was so timely. Now we're doing this one, just a little lagging behind the time to give us a little more time to study it, see what we might see in there. One thing that came up when I saw a recent subdivision was the panhandle, and just so you know, a panhandle decisions used to be from council, and then in 2018, late 2018, that was given back to staff. So that's one thing that we may want to consider getting back to council, just the effect of panhandles and so on. So it's just things like that you may see in there that you may want to amend it, but that's for December 7th to discuss. I just thought I'd give you a rough idea of why I did this. So I'll look forward to discussing this December 7th if it passes. Thank you.
Councillor Lerner, if you wish.
Sure, just for me, new counselor here, less than a month, and I'm still learning the ropes, learning the bylaws. Having this brought forward for discussion, I think, ahead of our priorities is important. An option to review and see what direction we want to take things, and if there's any changes we want to make or leave it as is or anything like that. It's just, I think, important time-wise. So I support all the information we can get, and I think this will help us in our new roles. So thank you.
And anything further? This is kind of just like a notice of motion. Anyways, unless there's anything further, I will call the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. That takes us on to introduction of late items. Any late items to be introduced? Okay, and moving on to notices of motion. Any notices of motion? And public clarification, persons recognized by the chair to speak must first state their name and address for the record, and then agenda item regarding which they are seeking clarification, and may speak for once up to 2 minutes to ask clarification questions. For example, how did the vote go? Any technicalities, request interpretation of abbreviations or jargon used this evening. We have one member in the gallery, if you wish. And I don't think anybody's registered to speak, no? Okay. All right, so that takes us on to item 16, motion to close the meeting. I'll simply make the motion that the regular council meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91A, C, D, F, G, I, K, and 90, subsection 2B and D of the community charter. So is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Savage. We'll move to call in the question. All those in favor and opposed? Okay, well, that was carried unanimously. We are now moving in camera.